If you look at the current economic status of the country, Sri Lanka obviously is now a bankrupt country. We have been declared as bankrupt, so we are not paying our debt obligations to the other creditors. Also, we are not importing things as we used to do. Now, as a result, on average, we are paying around $600 million as interest and repayments of debts, which we are not paying now at the moment. So we are saving around $600 million a month. Also, due to import restrictions, we are saving around $1,000 million per month. So that is the current, I would say, export-import status of this country. And given we are bankrupt and we are not importing and we are not paying our debt, so we are in sort of a, I would call that an interval in the hell, something like that. A situation which may look quite calm, but which is not really, because it's just the tip of the iceberg. All the problems are still under the carpet. So in very brief, that is how I would explain the nature of our economy. If I come up with a shorter example of this country, let's say if we have hire purchased a vehicle, we are leasing a vehicle, and now suddenly we have stopped paying our repayments. So suddenly once we stop our repayments, nobody would come and seize the vehicle and take legal actions against us. There's a time gap between our defaults and legal enforcements, everything. So we are having that sort of a time period at the moment. So we are defaulted, we got to restructure our debts, we got to repay them back. So, but we are in sort of an interval which we have to face with the real economic hardship in future. Now the IMF bailout is in total is an amount of $2.9 billion US, which will be given to us over the next 4 years' time, roughly. So that is hardly any financial gain or financial loan, because it's just a very minimal amount. Now the good part about the IMF is when we are dealing with the IMF, or when the IMF is working with Sri Lanka, when the debts are restructured with in light of the IMF funding, it gives us signal to the rest of the world stating that we are with the IMF. So as a result, we will be able to issue again sovereign bonds or go for bilateral debt agreements, things like that. Other than that, IMF wouldn't give any monetary strength to the country. But it's a good thing that IMF has given a green light. With the IMF, we can expect a slight recovery in the economy, but that doesn't guarantee anything. For example, in Greece, they have also defaulted the IMF loan. So that is also a possibility that if we do not really strengthen our finances, there's a possibility that we may default IMF loan as well. Now, one good thing about, let's say, if we are sick with some sort of a disease, the first thing, we got to control our growing temperature, something like that. So the same thing, now our economy is facing huge inflation. Now over the last 12 months time, inflation was around more than 100%. So that essentially means the prices have gone up twice or doubled over the last 1 year's time. Now the government needs to control this inflation. First of all, there are many reasons. One is, while we are having this sort of inflation that affects people's purchasing power, people are becoming poorer and poorer. Also, it affects our domestic economy as well, our industries, our service provision, everything. In a shrinking economy, that is why the economy is shrinking. Also, inflation results in our exports would be even harder to market in foreign markets, given local inflation is higher. The cost of production will be higher. So the first thing, in my point of view as an economist, is that the government should control inflation as the first step, as the gateway to economic recovery. Right. Going back to your previous question. Now, people's purchasing power has gone down by around more than 50%, I would say. In a rough estimate, 100 rupees that the real value of 100 rupees in 2019 would be around 33 rupees by now. So that means the currency, the local value of currency or the purchasing power of people has declined around 66%. So that is something severe, but with no increase in income, and this is simply due to inflation. Now, as I told you, what the government should do is controlling inflation. I'll give you one good suggestion for the government to proceed with. This is just one. There could be many. For example, oil or fuel is the lifeblood of the economy. Given like electricity, diesel are the main components of power generation in the economy. Now, if you look at the process of supplying fuel to the Ceylon Electricity Board and to the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, the government imposes a tax which is almost 100% on fuel. Now, if you look at the prices, if you look at Singapore Flex, the price of a petrol liter when it arrives Sri Lanka is around 200 rupees, well below 200 rupees. A liter of diesel would cost somewhere around 250 rupees. That is the price that we bring fuel to our country. And then the treasury imposes a tax on it, which makes a liter of petrol 400 rupees and a liter of diesel more than that. Now, fuel is given to the electricity board on these prices. So as a result, the prices of electricity has gone up. Also, transportation is using fuel at this price, so the transportation prices are going up. As a result of these two, the entire economy is facing an inflation because transportation and power are the main sources of production. As a result, all the prices, including bread, whatever you call, the prices are going up. So if the government, they have tried this somewhere around 2012, can provide at least for the Ceylon Electricity Board fuel at the CIF price, that's before tax prices, that will control inflation. This is just one example I can suggest for the policymakers. There are many other ways and means of controlling inflation. So that is how we can enhance the purchasing power of people and at least try to control the situation. If you look at the current taxes, now first we should say the taxes are quite usual in any economy. Even like the biggest argument that from the government side is that even in foreign countries the taxes are quite high. Well, I do agree. Say for example in Australia the taxes after a certain point is around 33% of income. But the issue here is now given our purchasing power, again what we discussed a few minutes ago, we were facing so much inflation over the last 2 years. Also our prices have gone up like twice or more and no increase in income over the last 12 months time. On the other hand, there is so much indirect taxes in the Sri Lankan economy. For example, tax on fuel. There are taxes on various other things like VAT, which are indirect taxes, which have also caused prices to go up. Also, there are others like things like other means of revenue generation from the government side, fees and all, which has gone up as well. So as a result, people are experiencing or gaining a very little real income. I'm using the word real income. That means nominal income would be the same, but the real, as in how much you can spend, is very little because all these indirect taxes, fees, everything has gone up. And on top of that, once we have these taxes, that will be devastating. That's why the trade unions are working on this. Because some people have found out that they are gaining negative salaries, as in once they have paid for their loans and everything, and once the tax is imposed, the salary they are getting is negative, so they got to pay something to the institute they are working. So now this is the nature of the situation. So tax, on the other hand, like there's an issue in the Sri Lankan tax rates because the tax curve should be something that increases gradually, as in for lower tax rates, it's for lower income brackets, the tax should be very low, as in say for example 200,000 nowadays is a very lower amount of revenue income in Sri Lanka at the moment. Even for 100,000 there's a tax. I do agree, even for 50,000 income there could be a tax, but that should be very minimum. It should be nominative, just 0.5% something. And when it goes up, the tax rate should go up like accordingly. Like what we have at the current tax rate, the issue is taxes are higher at middle income levels and taxes are comparatively lower at higher income levels. So that is one of the biggest issues. I believe the tax threshold should go up at least to 200,000 and then onwards tax should increase gradually. That's another problem as well. We have a population of 20 million in this country. Only 500,000 are paying taxes. So our tax base is quite weak. because a lot of people are not paying taxes because the tax system is not developed. So that is something the government should focus on rather than imposing all the burden on these 500,000 taxpayers. Because now if you look at the formulas and the rates of tariff on power, the increase is mainly for those who are consuming less power. So for a person who's consuming less than 90 units per month, the hike is more than 250%. Right. So that is quite high. Also, the other issue is now our economy is already shrinking. Now the estimates are that it has gone down from 20%. The World Bank estimates our economy will shrink another 4% by the end of this year, but that is for the formal economy. In a country like Sri Lanka, where there is so much informal economy, the actual drop in the economy would be more than 4% because most of the economic activities are not recorded. So as a result, my estimate as an economist would be another 10% or 20% for this year as well. So in this situation, if you can look around, our industries are closing down, mainly the local industries, those who do not have the capacity to export, so they don't have any other market. Local buyers, local demand is only confined to essential musts. If you look at mostly people are buying only the food items and essential musts and medicine and all, but have cut out most of the luxury items, what we consider luxury at our current state. So this, and on top of that, we have this huge increase in electricity bill, which definitely impact people's purchasing power for sure. It's another indirect tax. Also on industries, because they cannot cope up with these new prices. When they add their prices to their products, nobody would buy. Even for export prices, the export prices will go up tremendously given the electricity prices, which would be again a problem for the Sri Lankan exporters to market in foreign markets. The other thing, now we have a sudden appreciation of the rupee, which we have incorporated with all the good hopes. But look at what happens to the exporters with this, because the amount of rupees they are getting for the exports has gone down suddenly with increases in cost of production plus electricity and all the other factors that increase the cost of production. So these hikes, I will talk about the sudden increase in appreciation of the rupee, are all working as obstacles for economic recovery. That is a very crucial point when it comes to a crisis. In an economic crisis, poverty is increasing. For example, our poverty over the last 10 years was around 5% of the population, which has gone to 10% now. Now, in a crisis, the poverty is increasing, and it's a challenging task for any government to maintain poverty, to address poverty in a crisis. Now, one good thing the government can do, as we have discussed throughout the discussion, is to minimize inflation and strengthen their poverty alleviation programs. For example, Samurdhi. Now, if you look at Samurdhi, one of the biggest issues with Samurdhi is if you look at the actual Samurdhi gainers of this country, some around 7% of these people are from the highest income earners of this country, so who are getting Samurdhi anyway, and another 5% of actual poor people who should get Samurdhi are not getting Samurdhi. Now, as a result, the government is talking about a dummy variable. Apologies for the technical term. The government is thinking about giving Samurdhi based on electricity consumption. That was some times ago. What they were looking for is people who are consuming less than 90 units a month are considered to be poor. That is one of the tools that the government is trying to utilize. Now, looking at that, they can look at, okay, the people who are consuming less power are poor. So that's one. There are issues with that measurement, but yet Now see, all these impacts of power hike is again on those people who should receive Samurdhi. Samurdhi, for example, is given to political henchmen rather than those who really need it. So the government should look into these factors and strengthen their poverty alleviation programs in middle of the crisis. But anyway, I do agree that addressing poverty in a crisis is a hard thing, but something that should be done also, given if this continues, that the impacts could be seen in another 10 years time, because malnutrition, collapse in education, you cannot see the results suddenly. That will appear in another 10 to 20 years time. To be honest, the sad truth is we don't have. If we look at the economic history of this country, after President Premadasa's time, we never had a proper economic policy on our economy. If I could remember when we were kids, very young kids, we had some sort of an industrial policy for this country, where they have started some garment factories and starting to go towards semi-industrialization of the country, which was quite good by the time. Now, if you look at some of the export giants of this country, they were those organizations who came up during those industrialization policies, like during especially in the garment industry. Now after that, we never had a proper policy or a framework to address the needs of this country. What the government has always done is depending on the revenue that we are getting from those who are working in Middle East. Now India has banned sending housemaids to Middle East, given the higher social cost of such employment. But Sri Lanka, it's sad to see, we are solely depending on those money sent by those who are working in Middle East. But we have never thought about having our sources fixed. For example, if you look at India, India is generating more foreign currency, more dollars, by selling information related stuff, IT services to the world, compared to the revenue generated by Saudi Arabia by exporting oil. So imagine how much India is earning by strengthening the IT sector. What have we done? We were talking about mono railways, we were talking about technology villages, but we have never implemented any. What we have done is making some concrete investments on harbors, airports, and towers, which has no positive impact on the economy. So to be honest, as an economist, I do not see any strong policy or any considerable policy on our economy over the last 2 decades time. That is, Marianne, is one of the key points that I would like to emphasize as well. Now, if you look at the history of this, I'll go to the 2 years time back, when the Fitch ratings were downgrading Sri Lanka. Some of our key people who are responsible for economic management were talking about these downgrades as conspiracies against the country. They were saying, all right, these are conspiracies against the country because we have finished the war, or this usual gallery political discussions. But in that moment, we as economists, we have pointed out, now do not utter these words, because these words may burn the trust we are having from the international community. So we have lost reputation and recognition, and the recognition from international communities over the last 5 years due to many factors. One is corruption, bribery. There was a time that we were talking about 10% commission on all investments that is coming to the country, and all these corruption, bribery, mismanagements, and nationalist ideologies have ruined the reputation of this country internationally. Locally, if you talk to an average Sri Lankan, no one is believing in politicians because of corruption. Now, one good thing, I don't think this will ever happen, can be done is making proper investigations into what happened, into corruption that has taken place. For example, the illicit finance report states Sri Lanka 20 billion dollars has been looted from Sri Lanka over the last 10 years time. So that's 20 billion is almost half of the debt obligations we have. 20 billion, I would say, I'll give you one example. Israel is considering making a canal from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean throughout Israel, which would cost $15 billion. So 20 billion is more than that. So 20 billion is enough for Sri Lanka to survive for 5 years without doing anything. So that is the amount we have lost thanks to corruption. So that is the prime thing. Like IMF is talking about corruption control, but nobody is talking about that. IMF is talking about tax increase. Yes, the government is very happy about it. IMF is talking about revenue generation through taxes. That is fine. Politicians are happy, but nobody is talking about corruption control. So that would never happen even under this current system. So one good thing whoever comes to power in future can do is having proper investigation, like in Malaysia, like in Singapore. We were talking about becoming Singapore, but we are not talking about controlling corruption. Now that is something that should be done. That is an urgent must, but we cannot expect that from current regimes or current politicians, to be honest.